In this video, we're going to continue talking about importing data into LinkTools and how to view and manipulate that data. To begin with, let's look at our preferences here. If you go to the Data Import tab, there's a few items on this tab that we need to set that help control how data is brought into the log. The first one is the maximum allowed log size. The default here is 25,000. What this is the number of data points or the number of rows in the log itself. 25,000 is a very large number. You can get a pretty large log loaded up with that number. If you got a slower machine, you start noticing performance hits and things don't draw fast and all that, you might want to lower this number. What will happen is LinkTools will automatically truncate the log when it imports it to whatever value you have set here and give you a warning for that. Otherwise, the default should be fine for most machines. The next two things are the wideband and map sensors. This is the name that corresponds directly to what you have the sensor named in ECMLink. You can see here I've got my map sensor named map, and my wideband named wideband. I highly recommend that you do this for one main reason, and that is that when you review other people's logs, it's very difficult to go to the displayed values and go scrolling around through here trying to find something named linear wideband XYZ or some exotic map sensor name or whatever. If everyone would just call them map and wideband, it makes things much easier. But if for some reason you want to leave them named what they originally were in LinkTools, you can set that here to match what they are in ECMLink. The other values, RPM, AF ratio, SM, and all that, need to be named what they are by default in ECMLink, since there's not an option here currently to match that if you've changed them in ECMLink. The next two items we want to talk about are spool start RPM and throttle. What these control, LinkTools has the ability to actually automatically detect and mark your spool time and measure the length of time it takes for the turbo to spool. The way it does that is by determining when spool starts and when spool ends. Obviously, these two parameters help it decide how to determine that. Spool start RPM I've got set at 2500 and throttle is set at 80. What this is doing is telling to start looking for the spool startup point anywhere after 2500 RPMs and after the throttle's at 80%. You can change these based on your normal spool up characteristics of your turbo if you want. Otherwise, these defaults should be fine. The last two values here are peak, boost, beginning RPM, and ending RPM. What they do is they set an RPM window in which the program will start looking to see if boost is ended. I usually hit full boost somewhere between 4,000 and 4,200 RPMs, so I've got this set to 4,000. The program will look between 4,000 and 5,500 to start looking for where boost has peaked and has leveled off, and then it will set the spool up ending marker at that point. And we'll talk about those markers and why this is important a little bit later. Anyway, once you've got these parameters set like you want, hit save and exit, and we're ready to import our log. So go over here to the log chart page, hit import log, click the CSV file we exported from ECMLink. LinkTools will do some calculations here, and there's our log ready to play around with. To begin with, let's start talking about this window itself. Across the top here, you'll see a timeline. These are seconds in the log. They mark the grid lines on the graph display here. You can see at this point it's 4.1 seconds. I've got the cursor, I've clicked right here in the graph, and this white line with a white arrow at the bottom is the cursor. That just tells me where I'm at in the log, and I can move it around by clicking anywhere in the log I want. If I put it here on this 4.1 grid line, if you look down at the bottom left, it's telling me I'm on row 83 in the log, and the exact time in the log I'm at is actually 4.07 seconds. So that's how I know where I'm at in the log. Over here on the right, there's a vertical scroll bar. This lets you zoom in and out on the log. And if you're zoomed in, there's a horizontal scroll bar that lets you move through the log forward and backward in time. At the upper right, above the scroll bar, is a magnifying glass with an A in it. That's zoom all. Click that and the entire log will be displayed in the window. You also have the ability to set markers. You've got a beginning marker that's marked with a dashed line, a little green triangle, and an ending marker that's a red triangle. These are important because they let you set certain areas within the log that we want to do things with. And as you see later, there's a lot of things you can do with marked areas. To set these markers, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can hold down the Alt key and left click to move the starting marker, or hold down the Alt key and right click to move the ending marker. You can also use the arrow keys down here to just simply scroll the markers around. If you hold the Shift key and hit the arrows, they'll move in larger increments, and that's really handy when you've got a really large log and you're trying to move through areas quickly. And once you have an area marked here that you want, over on the right, it will tell you that you've got 92 rows in the log marked and a total time of 5.66 seconds. So from this marker to this marker is 5.66 seconds. It also tells you an averaged AFR error down here between the markers. That's pretty handy if you want to just get a quick look at, say, from here to here in the log, what's my AFR error there. It'll tell you down here you're 1.77% lean, which you can see by this yellow-green line right here. The white dotted line is a 0 reference point, and I'm slightly above that, and the average is 1.77%. So anyway, that's the log window itself. We'll get into some of the other ways of setting markers and all that in just a second. Over here on the right are graph display items. These are the items that were brought in directly from ECMLink. You can see we've got RPM, map, load factor, airflow, so on and so forth. Up here above that, we've got some options to show steady state areas in the log, which we'll get into that quite a bit later. 70-90 time markers. The LinkTools will automatically go through here and calculate where your 70-90 times are. If I look at speed, the program creates a smooth speed signal that's much more accurate than the one that you'll see in ECMLink, and then it uses this to calculate the 70-90 mile per hour times. If I click this, it'll show me where those are in the log. So right here I was at 70.7. It looks for the closest it can, and then the next closest is 20 miles above that. So here it's showing me that at 70.7 miles per hour at 8.67 seconds, and I hit 90 miles an hour here at 9.46 seconds. And when we get to the dyno sheet, you'll see it can actually it measures that time for you automatically, and there's some other things you can do. If I click show spool markers, these are the markers I was telling you about earlier where it calculates your spool. You can see right here that based on my RPM setting and being above 80%, that it set the starting spool point at actually 2.2 psi of boost. So I would probably want to lower my starting RPM point, and it would find something more back here. The ending time, it looks for where boost just starts leveling off based within that RPM window that I set, and here it's picked a point right here at 26.5 psi to say that's where spool ended. And again, you can set those preferences to kind of control where these points fall. Once you get it set, you should leave them that way though, so that all the logs are consistent. And finally, we can look at raw values. For example, horsepower and torque within the program are smoothed. It performs some post-processing on them so that you get nice smooth signals. If you remember on the export video, we talked about how raw and choppy they were. If you look at raw values here, you can see the raw data compared to how LinkTools has smoothed them and created an average curve without actually shifting it to the right. And then of course your AF ratio has been smoothed somewhat. Speed has also been smoothed considerably. Here's the raw values, the purple line there that ECMLink wouldn't normally give you, and you can see it's kind of hard to figure anything out by that. But if you look at the smooth values, there's a nice interpolated curve there that that LinkTools creates for you. So that's basically it on what these values are. At the top up here, you can see VE cell contributions. We're going to get into that quite a bit more when we start talking about VE errors and automatic correcting that. You have a right context menu out here where you can highlight marked cells, apply V corrections in different ways. We're going to talk about those, and of course preferences, and the set spool start and end markers. We'll go back and look at that for a second here. If you don't like where that spool actually ended up, like right here it's at 2.2, if I wanted to move it back here and say that's where it started, simply select that with your cursor, right click and say set spool start marker, and it will move that to that point. Same thing with the end marker. I could move that over to here, hit spool end marker, and now it says okay, that's where your spool definition is. And again, we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into the dyno pages and so forth. The next video we'll talk about these values over here a little bit more, and how to look at things in a few different ways.